Hello the world, hello people of Earth, hello Jason Isaacs, possibly out there on a spaceship somewhere. I guess we're all here because we've come to the realization that revision really sucks, and we probably want to make it suck a little bit less. And that's what I'm going to try to do in this particular video. We're going to look at ways of tackling revision, but in doing so we have to recognize that what we're doing here is we're getting into a battle on two fronts. And any military strategist will tell you that's a really stupid idea, but hey, there we are. We've chosen to do this anyway, and we know perfectly well that one of those fronts is the work that we have to do. There's no way of avoiding that. It's just there. So what's on the other side? Well, the bad news is that you can't get away from the other side of this front because the other side of this particular battle is you. What we're dealing with here is is a mental game. Revision is a mental game. And if your head is in the wrong place, then frankly, everything else is a waste of time. And the first thing to accept on that front is that this is not really a holiday. It might say holiday in the calendar, but what it is for you who have got exams coming up is that this is just a break from school. Oh, that's so unfair. Well, newsflash, so is life. And the sooner you accept that, the happier we will all be. Probably not. So let's see if we can actually take all of that abstract stuff and make it concrete. The good or the bad news, depending upon how you want to come at it, is that what you're dealing with here is something we all suffer from and something we will continue to suffer from. It's why I've got a pile of marking on my desk. It's why I will have a pint and a packet of crisps rather than going to the gym. The fact of the matter is that everybody struggles to balance what they know they should be doing long term against what they want to do here and now. It's called present bias, and it's not going to go away. And I suppose the good or bad news, again, depending on how you look at it, is that right now, as a teenager, you are in the worst possible situation for present bias. And I'm assuming that most of the people I'm talking to here are either teenagers themselves or parents of teenagers. Well, you probably don't need telling that right now we're looking at peak reward sensitivity, peak novelty seeking, peak sensation seeking. And at the same time your capacity for self-control is still in its developmental stages. What this means is that teenagers are in the most impulsive period of their life. You know you're doing stupid things, but you're going to keep doing them anyway. Spoiler alert, that's not going to change as you grow up and become an adult. You just get better at rationalizing them afterwards and maybe avoiding one or two. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. We are talking here about a psychological problem that's getting in the way of you working effectively. And if it's a psychological problem, then we need to have a psychological solution. And the first thing to do is to define our psychological objective, and that is defeating present bias to get on the road to exam success. Simple. And then we're going to look at some psychological strategies, and then we're going to look at some psychological tactics. And that's where this particular presentation is going to go. And we're going to start off by going right the way back to the start of the presentation and looking at this idea of revision and how it sucks. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to rebrand that. We're not going to talk about revision sucking. Instead, we're going to talk about the path to exam success. Because the first stage in dealing with present bias, stage to dealing successfully with present bias is to make the future the present. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we're not looking backwards at revision and then at some later date we're going to be looking at doing the exam. Quite the opposite. What we're saying is the exams start now. The exam is a 2-year process or a 1-year process, however long it is, with a written test at the end. But the exam is the entire thing. And so you are in the middle of the exam. It's not going to start later. It has started. And that is a subtle but very important psychological change. So we're not looking at something that is happening in the distant future. It has already started. You are already sitting your exam. And what you do now has a material impact on the final outcome. You are already in the exam. So we've brought the future into the present. What about the gratification? What about making things nice? Well, be nice to yourself. When you do something good, remember to reward yourself. And these are the two strategies that are going to enable us to bring all of that deferred gratification into the here and now. Thinking about the exams in the future is not massively effective in terms of motivating you right now. So we need to say right now we are in that exam period and we need to gratify or bring some degree of satisfaction into whatever it is that we're doing. Otherwise, we probably won't do it. It's as simple as that. So the tactics are threefold. We're going to look at routine, we're going to look at place, and we're going to look at rewards. Let's start with routine. Routine is just so critically important. If you don't have a routine, then you are going to be susceptible to drip. That is drift, inertia, and procrastination. Routine is what gets you up in the morning, and it's what keeps you going. And it is also the way in which you prove to the folks and to yourself critically that you are working. How do you know if you've done a good day's work if you haven't got a routine? If you can't look back and say, yep, did that. And what am I doing tomorrow? Well, I'm doing that, and I'm doing the next thing. You need that routine to prove to everyone that you're working, most of all yourself. And if you can do that, then you can fold balance into that routine. This has been a long, hard term. You need some R&R, but you have to be able to work that into a routine. And that's where rewards come in, but we'll come to that in a second. Bottom line, get a routine and stick to it. You will be extremely grateful for that. And I'll show you what a routine might look like towards the end of this particular presentation. Before then, we need to talk about place, because this is so fundamentally important. You need to have a place that is ergonomically, psychologically, and technologically appropriate. It needs to be comfortable. Don't make yourself suffer. You're not some sort of medieval monk who has to sit on a stick and work by a candle in a freezing room. You're not going to work effectively. The room has to be comfortable. You have to want to be there, or you will want to be somewhere else. Equally, it has to have all the things you need, because you don't want to be getting up and going out and coming back in and then going somewhere else. And it just disrupts everything, and that's stupid. It also must not have the things that distract you. And from all of these three things, it should be abundantly clear that the worst possible place for you to work is your own room. It is just inappropriate on so many levels. And it also has further problems. When you're dealing with work from a particular environment that's not essentially your school or whatever, you need a sense of transition. And this is critically important, because you go to work and then you go away from work. And then you have a demarcation. You have a place that is not work, and you have a place that is work. So essentially, here you are, you start at not work, you go to work. You do your shift, and then you go back to somewhere where is not work. So here, we are not working. And if we are here, then we are working. It's clear as day when you look at it like that. And then as you go from one to the other, you are able to prepare yourself. You have that mental readying, I am going to work. And then on the way back, you have the mental decompression, I am not going to work. And if you can do that, then you can work much more effectively. Anyone who's worked from home will tell you this. You can't get up, sit at your desk in the same room and work effectively. There has to be a degree of transition. There has to be an airlock between you and the place that you don't work. So whether it's the shed at the bottom of the garden, or better yet, a library in town, you need to find somewhere to work that is not your room. But at the same time, don't make yourself suffer. You don't have to make this a painful experience. It should be somewhere where you want to work, somewhere where you feel like you're suffering. Again, we have to deal with psychological problems with psychological solutions. And these three things will enable you to work effectively by yourself when you're not in a school environment. But you do have to find that suitable working environment. And then, when you've done all of that, and you've found a good place to work, and you've got your routine right, then give yourself rewards. If you've done a good shift in the day, then you don't have to work in the evening. If you've done a good shift during the week, then you don't have to work at weekends. You have that wonderful, what we call the drop the pen moment. We're done. I have done my work. I can go off and I can do something else. So we have a psychological transition as well as a physiological transition. And when you've done a particularly good shift, then reward yourself for that. Recognize the fact that you've done a good job. Reward yourself in the evening. Go for a pint, have a coffee, or have a fag, whatever. You're on holiday. I really don't care. But you have to reward yourself. You have to give yourself something to recognize that you've done a good shift. But again, the single most important reward there is that moment that comes when you have done everything else, when you've done your good shift, when you've got up, you've gone to the place that's worked, and you've worked, and now you're going back. This bit here is the drop the pen moment. I'm done. I'm going home. The drop the pen moment. My work here is done. Time for me to go off and be nice to myself. So there's a few things to think about. But the big thing is that everybody wants to know, how much work should I do? How much is enough? There's no answer to that. However, we can look at it this way. In the normal scheme of things, one would expect work or rate of progress to improve across the year such that the level of increment looks like that. However, we then chuck in a vacation. And we know, even with the best will in the world, if you don't do any work, you regress. You do not start where you left off. You get into bad habits, you forget stuff, everything goes. So we need to flip that one round. We look at the vacation instead as an opportunity to get ahead. And we do some work over that break. And what we do is, instead of coming back from the vacation level or more likely behind, we come back ahead. And so instead of having a final result that looks like that, we have a final result that looks like that. So the shift that you put in over the break will have a material outcome, a material impact on the final outcome. And the question you should be asking me is not, how much work should I do? Rather, you should be asking yourself, how big do you want that jump to be? How much of a discontinuity, a positive discontinuity, do you want to be in your progress from the time when you finish the term to the time when you start the next term? How big do you want that jump to be? Not how much work should I be doing, how big do you want the jump to be? Here are two possible plans. Okay, and I think the critical thing that I want you to get across from here is that we're looking at blocks, we're looking at chunks, but look at this, 7:30, down tools, 5 o'clock, down tools, 5:30, down tools. This is the drop the pen moment. I am done. I can go and do something else. This is what we are aiming for. This is why we are giving ourselves the schedule. This is why we're doing those little psychological tricks. And if we add all of those up, Christmas hop, Christmas break we're coming to now, we've got about 11 functional days. That's going to give you 66 hours of work. 7 by 60, 11, that's 77 hours of work. You transfer that into teaching time. That's a huge amount of teaching time. That's a monumental amount of teaching time that you have done. And that is going to mean that when we come back, we've overcome present bias, we've used our strategy, we've used our tactics, and the net result of all of that is that rather than you coming back from this vacation having lost time, you've actually stolen a march and you've made time. This is your working day by the number of days, and we wind up with this huge, great increment here. How big do you want that to be? Because this is where you could potentially be at the end of this term. That's enough from me. I hope that kind of makes sense, and I hope that it was helpful. If you do have any questions, then you know where to find me, and I look forward to hearing those, and I look forward to wishing you a very, very happy break, and I'll see you on the other side. Best wishes.